time this morning. I'll let you open up to start off with an opening statement, and then we can throw it up to some questions.
Thanks, Brew. I appreciate it. Sorry about the attire I'm wearing today. It's a little chilly outside of practice today, so I'm a little bundled up. Still trying to get feeling back in my fingers right now, but always good to be out in the practice field. It's nice being able to talk to you guys. Yes, it's been a while, really going back to a little bit in the summer, but all the way back to last spring. And certainly been good seeing you guys, seeing you out in public and being able to interact a little bit at some of the games we've had here. But just briefly, I kind of hit just on our 22 class, sitting at 11 commitments right now. Feel good about where we're at. As you well know, we've got an extremely small senior class, just 13 scholarship seniors on our roster this year. So, we're expecting probably one of the smallest signing classes in Coach Ferentz's tenure here. And there's a lot of fluidity with that. We've got some guys that, have advantage. They've got the opportunity to take advantage of a COVID year if they want. We've had some conversations, but nothing's been decided on any of those guys, and probably will not be until the season's over here. And then, you're always looking at, any possible NFL entries and other attrition. So, really the number we're working at, we've got 11 commitments. We're kind of settling on that 16 to 17, maybe 18 range in terms of what we're doing, and we feel good about some of the guys we got left on our board. And then, obviously there's your transfer portal out there as well that we'll utilize if we need to at certain spots, and just keeping an open mind there. But it's been good to have, finally recruiting back to normal after such a long hiatus. We had a little bit of a taste of it this summer, getting kids back on campus in June, and then it went back to, a dead period through most of July and then all of August. And really this fall, it's been pretty open game. Had a lot of kids on campus with their families. It's been huge to have them come experience Kinnick. Obviously that Penn State game was an atmosphere like I haven't seen before in my 15 years of college football. Just the electricity throughout that stadium, and it was from the first whistle to the last was really fun to be a part of, and obviously put on a great show for all those kids and families that were in attendance. And as we're getting in here about 5 or 6 weeks away from signing day, just looking to kind of put the finishing touches on our classes and kind of finish off, this 2022 class and then move on to the next one. So with that being said, I'll open it up to questions.
Thank you, Tyler. The first question this morning is from Tom Caker.
Hey, Tom.
Hey, Tyler. I beat Doc for the first question. This is a big day for me. What I know you talked about 16 to 18. What positions are you guys kind of zeroing in on to kind of complete the class?
Yeah, I think, Tom, you guys always do a good job covering our roster, and obviously the offers are out there. We don't throw out a ton of offers like some other places, so you probably have an idea what we're looking for. But, obviously corner, we're still looking at, a couple of corners, maybe 3. It's certainly a huge need. We didn't take one in the last class. We don't have one committed in this class. Obviously going to lose a couple of guys this year, so that's probably the most pressing need left in the 22 class. We'll still look for a potential offensive lineman, a potential defensive lineman, a linebacker or 2 possibly. We'll kind of see what happens there. And then after that, it's going to be best available. Every single year, the best part about working with Coach Ferentz is he's so patient in this process, and his biggest thing is let's see some senior film on kids and let's see who evolves and who comes up through the ranks. And when you have a year like last year with the COVID year and you had so many kids that their seasons were disrupted, you had kids that played in the spring, you're starting to see a lot of those seniors that really, we probably got 5 or 6 guys that we've offered in the last month or so that weren't on our radar in the summertime that have really come along and have had huge senior years. And just like every year, if there's a kid, regardless of position, that we feel extremely strong about, we'll have a conversation as the staff, and if he's going to add value to our team and somebody that we really feel good about, we'll end up taking him. But those are really the main positions there, the core positions we're looking at, and we'll kind of see how it works out from there. And again, as I said earlier, just some of our guys being able to take advantage of that COVID year too, if they decide to come back next year, that can always shift numbers and kind of needs and what we want to do there. So it's certainly going to be fluid over the next 4 to 5, 6 weeks here. And we talk about it daily as a staff, and we've got a good idea where we want to go and a good board put together on how we want to finish, and we'll keep working from there.
Tyler, the next question from Scott Document.
Hey, Scott, how are you?
I'm great, Tyler. I'm first loser today. Tom beat me out here. But I guess I've heard that you've handled now some of the number assignments, and a lot of it's through discussion through the recruiting process. How did you get that role? How fun is it, or is it not fun for you? And how often does it kind of matter? I mean, not the ultimate decision making, but it's important to the prospects that you're talking about.
For sure. You know, when I was here the first time around, I wasn't really involved in it a whole lot. When I'd gotten down to Vanderbilt, kind of the way we structured our roster management and just how we kept track of it down there was something that was new to me, but was extremely interesting. I think it's one of the more fun things I do that's probably not talked about a whole lot, and I certainly don't have final say on any of this, but you're trying to put together a huge puzzle, right? And it's just like a checking account. You know, there's checks and balances every single year, and it's by position. So when I got back here in 16, I kind of brought our board and how we had our scholarship distribution chart, arranged at Vanderbilt and presented to Coach Ferentz and our coordinators at the time. I was like, hey, look, this is just for, I think this is a little bit more organized. It allows the entire staff to see at any point in the year where we're at currently with scholarship guys as well as walk-ons, total team roster. My projections, I'll always project it out 2 classes. So I'll project our 22 class as well as our 23 class. And as you can imagine, when I set those numbers for the 23 class, they're extremely fluid. We don't really have any true hard numbers in the 23 class because you never know what's going to happen on your roster between attrition, NFL, whatever it may be, transfers coming in. But really, it's just looking at, what's our goal. We have a goal number for each and every position that is decided on, really with the coordinators and Coach Ferentz. And then obviously there's input from those position coaches. But you go back historically and you look at, what we've carried at each position. Special teams factors into it with certain positions. So you're going to have more tight end, DB, linebacker bodies that play a core of our special teams. So that's going to factor in how many guys you want at each spot. And then from there, it's just, at the beginning of every year, we'll really set those hard numbers based on what's on our roster, who we expect to leave. If we got any guys that really maybe are just core special teams guys that we know aren't going to factor into our 2 deep, you may have to throw a guy in on a position there. So it's extremely fluid, but it's something that I enjoy doing. I kind of look at that chart every single day, and especially as we get later into the process where we're talking about, hey, maybe we only need to take 1 linebacker in this class, but we've got 2 guys we feel really good about. How is this going to affect our numbers, and where are we taking this spot from? Who's going to be light next year? What position is going to be light? And we've got a great staff, and they all understand it, and they get it, and they're good with it. If we need to, rob Peter to pay Paul at one position. The numbers are never perfect. They're never, ever on goal. I try my hardest, but, being in this now for as long as I have been, it's never going to be perfect. But you can't get too far away from those numbers. Otherwise, you're going to start having holes in rosters, and you don't want to have to play catch up, and you don't want to have to worry about going to the portal or trying to find transfers for that. So it's just a daily conversation, and it's been good so far, and it's something I enjoy. And Coach Ferentz is great. I think it takes a little stress off his plate when he knows that somebody's looking at that actively. And if we've got an issue come up, but, I'll go to Brian and Phil first and foremost on their side of the ball, and then talk with Coach about that.
The next question, Tyler, is from John Steppe of Cedar Rapids Gazette.
Hey, John.
Hi, Tyler. How are you?
Good. Yourself?
I'm good. Thank you. So you were mentioning the fluidity with the extra COVID year. How difficult is it to plan when, along with all the other factors that give some fluidity, you have that on top of it where you aren't quite sure how thin you're going to be at certain positions?
Yeah, that's a good question because it is a little bit different this year, and it's I wouldn't say stressful, but it's tough, because if we have 6 or 7 spots that we have left, and we know most years we can go out and we can fill those spots, and you're okay with it. Well, this year, we may have 3 guys on our roster that may come back. That they may be 50-50 right now. During the season, we're certainly not going to press those guys for answers. That's the last thing we want them to worry about. We want them to play, up to their capabilities and best football they can. So it is a little bit tricky, because you get to the end of the year, and right now, if we had 6 guys that wanted to commit, I'm not sure we could take 6 commitments because then we get into a numbers crunch at the end of the year. So that's something we got to keep an eye on. Luckily for us, we, like I said, we feel good about where our board's at, and we got some guys, and I think we have some guys that are, honing in on decisions here pretty shortly. But, for the next 4 weeks, we just got to keep an open mind, and we got to know that it could be 4, it could be 7, it could be 8. Who knows when we finish this? But, certainly if a guy wants to come back and he's been a guy that's been a contributor for us for 2, 3 years, even a year, we're going to take him back with open arms. That's a guy we know about. He's been in our program. Obviously, rather than going out and finding a high school kid or, a transfer, if you have somebody that's put their blood, sweat, and tears into our program for 1, 2, or 3 years, you're certainly going to stick with those guys. So it's been a little tricky. It's not ideal in any way, obviously, but, I think really this year is going to be the year where we see it really affect our roster. Moving forward, it'll be interesting to see how many guys, take advantage of that extra year. And when you're talking about it, it's great to have those guys back, but you're talking about guys that are going to be 5th, 6th-year college students. And I know we're talking about student athletes, but I don't know how many people want to be in college for 6 years. It's not something they probably set out to do unless they're doctors and I don't think we have any doctors currently on our team, but there's just so many factors, and it's case by case with each kid. Certain guys are going to want NFL feedback on where, scouts and personnel see them on their boards, and we'll certainly provide that to those guys. But it'll be a conversation here as soon as our season's over, and it'll provide some clarity for us. But, I think we've got a good plan moving forward. You got to be flexible in a situation like this, in a year like this, for sure.
Tyler, the next question from Chad Leistico.
Chad, sorry about our Bears, man. I was feeling really good that first half last week, Shut my door in the fourth quarter.
Can't even get excited about losing because we don't have a first-round pick next year. I wanted to ask. I asked Kirk this the other day, and about more mobile quarterbacks, and obviously two of the more successful ones you've had are Brad Banks, C.J. Beathard. But it seems like it's hard to find or get those guys to Iowa. Is that something you guys are talking about, or have talked about, or not a priority? Or I guess just walk me through what you get, how high you guys rank mobility, and whether it's tough to get those guys.
For sure. I think first and foremost as a quarterback, just the way our offense is structured and the way we like to throw the football, you've got to be able to throw the football. That's 100% the first thing we're looking at. The mobility portion, it's on our grid. When we're watching kids, it's something we take into account, obviously. And you go back each year when we took Petrus versus the other guy we had on the board. One was probably more mobile than the other, but one was probably a better pure pocket passer. But it's not. We're not going to go set out and say we need to find a dual threat quarterback. And for us, I think at times, sometimes, people from the outside, they get enamored with these dual threat quarterbacks. But C.J. Beathard was not a dual threat quarterback. C.J. was a quarterback that could really sling it, but could move around a little bit. Nate wasn't obviously the most athletic guy we've had, but he could do some things. And I think we've got some guys on our current roster that can move around as well. And but for us, when we're evaluating guys, it's all about accuracy for us. You've got to be able to throw the football. There's such a premium on that. You see a lot of kids that are labeled as dual threat quarterbacks that are in high school in the 50-60% completion percentage range, which is a little worrisome when you're watching high school kids, especially Division I quarterbacks. And there's factors you have to take into account, who they're throwing to, who they're playing against, certainly. But for us, it's always going to be, we're going to find a throw first guy. And then if we can find a guy that can move around a little bit, and I think we've got a guy, in our class right now that can do that as well. So it's never going to be a priority to find straight dual threat, but obviously you want to find guys if you can that can move around, extend plays. I mean, that's certainly important in our evaluation process.
Next question, Tyler, from Tom Caker.
Tyler, I wanted to ask you about NIL and kind of how much of a talking point has that been with recruits? How much does it come up? How do you guys address it? Do you address it differently with in-state kids versus out-of-state kids? How do you approach it?
Sure. It's this summer it was definitely a topic of conversation. And I really think that's just because it was new to everybody, and it was finally becoming a big deal throughout the country. Recently, it hasn't been a huge topic of conversation. I feel like I'm not getting as many questions about it. Neither is our staff, but each time we do have a kid on campus, we do take time to walk through our flight program, what some of our current players are doing. We can't give them specific numbers in terms of, hey, Spencer's making this or Goodson's making this. But it's, I think initially that wave, everybody was enamored with it. And I feel like it's kind of cooled down a little bit. And one thing I would say, it's crazy, and I wrote it down here. You look at some of the most, the highest paid players in college football and just what they're making and then where they're at in their current seasons. A couple of quarterbacks that have been benched. Thibodeau at Oregon, who missed half the season with injury. Derek Stingley at LSU, who's missed most of his season with injury. So I'm curious personally to see how some of these companies, after this first year, they've had their trial run now and they put a lot of money in investing, their money and time into some of these athletes, how they're going to approach that moving forward. Do they want proven commodities? Are some of these deals going to be as glamorous and is money-wise worth as much as what they've given them so far? But it's, I think with everything that, in my opinion, that we've seen in college football, any major change you see, I feel like that first 3 to 6 month period, there's always going to be an overreaction. Everybody's enamored with it. But once you get into it and everybody's part of it, it kind of slows down a little bit. It's not nearly as newsworthy. But for our team personally, I think our guys have done a great job. The biggest thing we were worried about when guys start getting paid, jealousy in the locker room, is it going to tear the locker room apart, or guys going to be curious why they're not getting paid when player X is getting paid? And really, our players have done a great job. Everybody is really genuinely happy for guys that are making money here, guys that are taking advantage of their marketability and being able to put a little money in their pocket. And it really has not been a distraction for our guys. And that was probably the biggest worry from our staff, is just how is this going to affect our current team. But and to your second part of your question about in-state versus out-of-state, I mean, sure. There's kids that, and they're not even necessarily in-state kids, but legacy kids too, that their worth for the Iowa Hawkeyes in terms of marketability within the state is going to be much greater than some of those kids out of state, at least initially. And then anybody that comes here and has success, and they're marketable and they're great kids that are good in front of media and can attach themselves to certain companies, they're going to have chances to make money. I'm not going to go Nick Saban and say 7 figures, but they're going to have chances to make money. And we have some guys too on our team that could be extremely marketable that just want nothing to do with it. Their focus is on being a good football player, being a good teammate, and trying to push this team forward. So it's been a little bit of a mixed bag, but it hasn't been as much of a topic of conversation than I would say the last month or two that it was in the summer, through the start of the season.
Tyler, the next question from David Eichholt.
Hey Dave, how are you?
Hey, good, Tyler. Appreciate you taking the time to do this. What kind of struck me about your opening statement, you talked about there were probably 6 kids or so that weren't on your radar a month ago that have now earned offers. I was just sort of curious, can you kind of pinpoint to 1 or 2 things as to how they've come about in the process in this year? I mean, I know you guys got eyes and ears everywhere, so like I said, it was just a little bit surprising to hear that.
Yeah, I mean, every year we're going to have guys that we feel really good about that play, strong senior years. But you go back to last year, we had 2 or 3 spots left once we started the season. In a situation where this year, where, we really tried to keep our class small from the get-go anyways, just because we had a small senior class. It's a little refreshing. As a recruiting guy, yeah, I want my class done by July 31st and we're on to the next one. That would be ideal in every situation. But at the same time, when you look back just through the history of some of our better football players here, even some of the guys that are on the team right now, you look at Seth Benson, Riley Moss, Kayvon Merriweather, all those guys were late takes, guys that really senior film was huge on those guys. Desmond King, I mean, you go down the list, there's been a million of them. That's one thing that Coach Ferentz has always been a little weary on in terms of just how much the recruiting process has sped up is, every year, he says it, there's going to be seniors that emerge. But it's gotten to a point where so many schools are full in typical times where there's not spots for them. Whereas this year, there's been such, flux with everybody's rosters with the COVID issue, the transfer portal now that it seems like, some more schools have some more spots opened up. But for us specifically, having 5 or 6 spots, open once we started the season, it was nice to be it was refreshing to be able to watch senior film and see some of these kids that for whatever reason, maybe they couldn't go to camps in the summer because they were injured. Their season was interrupted last year. They played in the spring. They just didn't have the exposure they typically would. It's been really refreshing to watch these guys and be able to see them play football in their senior year. Now I'll watch every single guy that's committed to us every game, Saturday or Sunday that they play on Friday night, just to check in on guys, see how they're progressing, make sure that they're who we thought they were. But it has been pretty exciting to be able to watch guys that we didn't know anything about that are just having monster senior seasons. Then the more you dig on these guys, the more you get to understand maybe why they weren't being recruited last year. There were reasons, again, injuries in the summer, couldn't go on the camp circuit, had a spring season, playing a different position, whatever it may be. So it's been fun. It's been refreshing. As a recruiting guy, I wouldn't want to live in this situation every single year. But just given, the number of our seniors in our current class and just the size of the class we're looking to take, it's kind of allowed us to be a little bit pickier and just be a little bit more patient in this process this year.
Tyler, the next question from Scott Dockerman.
Yeah, Tyler, I had a question about jersey numbers, and that is, I know that's a major topic for not every player, but a lot of players, and
more than you would think. Think.
How do you go about that? I mean, is that something that you discuss before the commit, during the commit, after it? And when you get into a situation where you have, say, a running back like Tyler Goodson and a linebacker like Justin Jacobs, they both want to wear 5, and you really don't want to sign both of them that number, how do you go about that process?
That's a good question. So when I got back in 2016, I started handling the jersey assignments as well, and it's nothing crazy. I mean, if we get some kids committed early and like Tyrone Tracy, he wanted 3 out of the gate, and we knew 3 was going to be open that next year, so we tell, hey, Tyrone, you're going to have 3. and typically I'll try and give guys what they have in high school within reason. And then I'll reach out to the guys too after signing day and get their top 3 picks. And most of the guys are good with that. Some guys are, they want every available number on the roster just to double check what they can and can't have. And we'll work them that way. We've never really had any issues. It's actually all LeVar's fault, so give LeVar crap about this. The hardest part in assigning jersey numbers is special teams. That's where we're going to double up some of our skill guys, obviously, and some of our semi-skill and skill guys. The hardest part is just projecting, okay, what's this guy, what position could he play on any of the 4 phases of special teams? How's it going to affect this guy? And that was a big part with Tyler Goodson and Justin, is I had to explain to the Goodsons, like, hey, I really want to give you 5, but we've got a linebacker at 5, and there's a chance you could be on 2 or 3 phases of special teams together, and unless you want to throw on a big Velcro jersey on kickoff and look terrible in a jersey that's 3 sizes too big for you. And we try and tell guys too, like, I understand numbers are important, but you're going to come here and hopefully you make something out of that number where everybody wants to buy your jersey and wear your number. But guys have been pretty good about it. The trickiest part is just the special teams aspect, and that's why we have to change numbers, every once in a while right before the season starts, as we start to see where guys kind of progress on our roster and take over different roles. We've got to go to it. I had to go to Terry and Charlie Jones when they both were in 16 and figure out who was going to wear a different number. And those guys were easy. Terry's like, I got it. Just tell me what's available. And not all of them are that simple. Sometimes we really got to wheel and deal and negotiate with some guys, but for the most part, it's never an issue.
One follow to that is the number 1.
Yep.
That's one a lot of guys want. You guys have never. It's been a kicker or it's been a walk-on in some respect. Is that one kind of off limits?
I don't know if I'd say anything is off limits now. I mean, we got, Deontay Vines is now in 0, so I think everything's open at this point. I don't know how many defensive linemen you're going to see in single digits. I know that's a growing trend. I mean, maybe, but typically, it's to the point now where all the guys know if they want a jersey number change, they'll come to me first, and depending on who it is and where they're at on the roster and what they're playing, typically I can go try and grease up Coach Ferentz a little bit. But for the most part, I don't think he really cares at this point. I think the only thing he probably wouldn't want to put a defensive lineman in a single digit, but who knows? We may get there. You never know.
Tyler, the next question is from the new recruiting reporter at the Des Moines Register. We haven't met yet, so I apologize if I butcher your last name. But Alyssa Hurtle, the next question is yours.
Hi, Tyler. Thanks for being here. So I know you kind of touched on this in your opening statement, but can you talk a little bit about the momentum that was built leading up to and then during the Penn State game? And then, kind of coming off of that, if you guys are doing anything to reassure recruits, during this losing streak that's coming after it?
For sure. Yeah, I mean, for sure. It's, there were probably some guys in the summer that went different ways that we were on pretty hard that, started to reemerge, obviously, as we were going through the Penn State game there and the excitement of the team and just how we were playing. But even then, it's not like we've lost anybody. And I know it's tough. We haven't won a football game in 3 weeks. It seems like forever. You have 2 losses and a bye week built in there. It's definitely been long. But really, I just point to our program success, and what we've been able to do over the last 3 years, over the last 7 years. You look over the last 3 years, there's 7 teams in the country in Power 5 that have a better winning percentage than us in that last 3-year span. We're second in the Big Ten in that 3-year span. And then you go back 7 years, same thing. Only 7 teams in the country that have a better winning percentage than us, and we're third in the Big Ten. So the run we've been on is impressive no matter how you look at it. Obviously, I know people are disappointed in the last 2 games, and certainly they should be, and we are too, But when you look at the whole picture of things, and when these guys have been in high school or back to middle school, we've been incredibly consistent, and we've won at a high level. And when you're talking about 7 teams, 5 of those teams have been in the playoffs. It's us and the other 2 teams that haven't yet. So we're always right there. And more than anything, kids want to play for a winning program, and when we can put those numbers in front of them, just so the continued success that we've had, I mean, that's a powerful tool to have, And again, we're ranked in the top 25, which is great. Hopefully we win some more games and keep moving up. But it's really, to reassure them on that, and then to get them around our facility and get them in our building and around our people and our players. And it's just different when you can get guys on campus and around everything we have to offer here and get around our players. And, you've got a chance to play for a legendary head coach. Your staff stability. It's hard to argue that our staff is as stable as any in the country. And a lot of kids, winning is important to them, but they're not going to dump teams for 1 loss or 2. Luckily for our recruits, they don't react the way some of our fans do. They stick with us through this and don't get so mad. But momentum is everything. Momentum in recruiting is everything. in a football game. And certainly when you're winning at a high level, that's something you want to take advantage of and keep pushing. And you know, we haven't seen anything drop off by any means since the Penn State game. Like I said, we feel good about the remaining board we have, and we're going to keep pushing these guys and see where it ends up.
So you were touching a little bit on the having recruits back in person. How helpful was that? And is there anything from the kind of COVID remote world that you think is still going to be an effective thing to do in post-COVID?
For sure, yeah. It's nothing beats getting kids on campus. I mean, just one, around our staff, in front of our players, just being able to actually see campus, see our facilities. Obviously, step foot in Kinnick. Do the old fabled photo shoot that every recruiting guy in the country hates, but we have to do it so kids can get pictures of themselves. That's nothing replaces that. I mean, absolutely nothing at all. And you can do a million Zooms. You can get on Zooms with our staff and our players, but there's nothing that beats being in person. And then when you're talking about, these visits, kids will be on campus for 10 to 12 hours for an unofficial visit, official visit 48 hours. And that's a lot of time for them to be around you. That's a lot of time for you to be around them. You get a better feel for the kid and the family. And it's tough from a distance from Zoom. You get a good feel on these kids, but it's an hour at a time, maybe an hour and a half. You don't want to spend 10 hours on Zoom and just wear kids out. So nothing's ever going to replace that human interaction. But in terms of what we learned from COVID and how we utilize it moving forward, I mean, we'll certainly keep utilizing the virtual visits, especially just to get before a kid can get on campus, to give them more of a taste of what we're about, what we have to offer, more history about Iowa football and just the university and the community in general. It's something we'll certainly keep using moving forward. And then obviously we're going to push to get kids back on campus just to be able to get around our staff and us to be able to get around them.
All right, Tyler, thank you so much for your time and your insight this morning. Good luck on Saturday.
I appreciate it, everybody. Thanks again.
Thanks, Tyler.
Thanks. We will see you in Evanston.